It's on. Okay, hello, virtual students. Mrs. Tester here. I'm not coming at you live. I'm coming at you whenever you're watching this. But I'm going to be going through the notes. I'm also going to post a picture of the class notes. So if you can't read it on the board here, it's fine. I'll post it for you. This is just for you to get the conversation as well. Okay. So we just reviewed the Padlet for chapter 7 that talks about Joe's sexism, their ageism against one another. And I just want to dig deeper into chapter 7 as well. Okay, guys. So whatever it is you take your notes, probably on the back of your response and analysis that was due today. And again, guys, hopefully you realize that I haven't really been checking those or going through them. Hopefully what I say up here covers everything that you've explored yourself, right? That's kind of the purpose of this here. Okay. So let's see. We go into chapter 7. Okay, so we just talked about the significant quote, right? Janie had robbed him of his illusion of irresistible maleness that all men cherish. And again, that idea of sexism, that's going to be an important quote. I'm not going to write it up on the board because it's on our Google Classroom. So you might want to just make a note, right, of our Google Class comment discussion for today. Okay, so again, they're arguing in chapter 7 because Joe has realized that he is getting older. How much older is Joe than Janie? Yeah, he's in his late 50s, like mid late 50s, and she's like 35, okay? And we knew that too, that he was older, right? When he comes and like steals her from Logan, right? She's only 17 when she marries him. And it's interesting here when she talks about at the beginning of chapter 7, she talks about how 35 is double 17, right? And how depressing that is to her. And she talks a lot about the imagery of the road, right? That road that he used to come down that offered promise is now kind of desolate. And she still pictures herself going on that road and having that freedom. Okay, so again, chapter 7 is basically all that goes down in the store. At the end, it says here, and the cruel deceit of Janie, making all that show of humbleness and scorning him all the time, laughing at him, and now putting the town up to do the same. Joe Starks didn't know the words for all this, but he knew the feeling. So he struck Janie with all his might and drove her from the store. Okay. So again, it's the narrator giving us the way that Joe feels, but Joe can't articulate this to Janie, which is the whole issue. Okay. So in chapter 8 is when they start sleeping in separate beds, right? And that's when his health really starts to decline here. And again, Joe seems to blame Janie for his illness. Did y'all pick up on that?
Yeah.
Whenever Janie is having the conversation with Phoebe, and she says, Janie, I thought maybe the thing would die down and you never would know nothing about it. But it's been singing round here ever since the big fuss in the store that Joe was fixed and you was the one who did that. Okay. So again, this idea that Janie is to blame for the deterioration of Joe's health. And it's interesting our perception of that because you've heard that people can die of a broken heart, right? And that your personal life can really affect your health. I would say that this tension between them for years definitely probably put stress on both of their lives, right? But again, he confines himself to the room and he won't let her see him, right? And again, hopefully you understand that Joe's power was in his stance, was in his health, right? To be this rotund, robust, like big voice. And now he's sagging, he's getting older, right? Even the way he stands is different. And then he can't even get out of bed. We learn later that it's kidney failure that he dies from, right? And that he is too prideful to get an actual doctor. He starts going to a root doctor. And what's really interesting that Hurston kind of exposes here, I don't know if y'all have noticed this with your grandparents, but or anyone old in your life or getting older, it's interesting how people change their personalities as they get older. For example, when my papa, like right before he died and he was really sick and went through this terrible time, he would always sit in his chair and order stuff through infomercials, like just like, like the random vacuums or like the versatile salt and pepper shakers. It was like, that was something that he would never do before, or that he probably would have made fun of other people doing. But like in his old age, he just became this old man who like ordered things off TV and like, vacuumed his room every day with his little like infomercial vacuum. And so it was just strange. Like you just saw them kind of evolve into things that they said they would never be, or whatever it is. And so Joe, who always made fun of like witch doctors, right? Like root doctors and holistic medicine, has now turned to holistic medicine in his old age. And I think that's a really interesting thing. And maybe you guys, it'll take some time for y'all to kind of witness that in your own lives. But it is interesting, kind of the weird things that old people do, right? He also wore a Cher wig for a while because his head would be cold. So that's like a whole thing, right? I mean, that's just a funny story that I have.
Cher's in the singer Cher?
Yeah.
Like Morticia Addams?
It was like the long, like really long black hair. Oh, it was so funny. But anyway, so he starts going to a root doctor, all this good stuff here. Okay. What I want to do is I'm going to write on the board a quotation. Hopefully you realize the way that Hurston is personifying death in these chapters. This is super important. If you ever see death described as square-toed or steel-toed, that is an intertextuality with this book. Yeah, so she's the one who kind of like created this idea of death. And then also, it's intertextuality with who? Who is the priestess of personifying death? Emily Dickinson. Okay, so again, I'm going to, and death is always capitalized as a proper noun when Janie talks about it. So this is on page 84. This is so again, our chapter 7 quote notes came from the Google class. This is for chapter 8. Okay, and we're just going to do death that strange being with the huge square toes who lived way in the West. And again, that's on page 84. Okay.
Kind of like Western medicine.
Yeah, like it's interesting because we know that we're East Coast, right? Because we're Florida and all that good stuff. The West being as far as it can get, right? As far away, right? Something that we don't really think of until it's upon us. Is what I'm assuming. I'm sure you could argue any reason why West. But again, this is important because we have intertextuality with Dickinson. Again, because, do I remember, is it could not or did not stop for death? I think it's did not. Stop for death. Her famous dash. What's the next line, y'all? He kindly stopped for me, right?
Don't you have like a ton of markers in your cart?
Yes, this one doesn't work very well, does it?
I feel like we throw away a marker every single night.
This is true.
Okay. Because he did not stop, because I think it's I could not, y'all. I think it's because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. Okay, this one sucks too. Great. I made it. I'm never that athletic. Okay. All right. So I'm going to read this paragraph here on page 84. It's at the very top. So Janie began to think of death. Death was strange being with the huge square toes who lived way in the West. The great one who lived in the straight house like a platform without sides to it and without a roof. What need has death for a cover, and what winds can blow against him? He stands in his high house that overlooks the world, stands watchful and motionless all day with his sword drawn back, waiting for the messenger to bid him come. Been standing there barefoot, there was a where or a when or a then. She was liable to find a feather from his wings lying in her yard any day now. Okay? So again, this idea of her personifying death, it doesn't seem like she herself is afraid of him, right? But she knows that death isn't coming for her this time, right? She knows that it's for Jody. And he's in denial about the fact that he's going to die, right? Hopefully you feel some empathy for Jody in these final moments here and what happens, because it's a bitterness that he doesn't get to resolve before he dies. He doesn't get closure with him and Janie's relationship.
Maybe doesn't try.
Yeah, certainly you could argue that. Okay, so here we go. Here's this next quote on the same page, which is interesting. Okay, she says, people who would not have dared to foot the place before crept in and did not come to the house, just squatted under the trees and waited. So the townspeople are circling like buzzards, right? She says, rumor, that wingless bird, had shattered over the town. Okay, so again, going back to everything in chapter 6 with the buzzards. Okay, so that's on that same page. So I want us to write it here. Rumor, that wingless bird. Shattered, not shattered. Okay, and then certainly this is an allusion to chapter 6, buzzards. Do you see how she creates these allusions, these symbols, and then she recycles them, and they turn into tropes, right? What is a trope?
Another meaning, like a symbol.
Yeah, a symbol. It's repetitive, right? It's something that continues again and again. Okay, we've got a lot of things going on here. I'm going to read aloud just some of my favorite quotes from her last conversation with Joe, and then we'll write the significant ones that might appear on your quiz, okay? So finally, Janie goes into Joe's room to talk to him, right? She knows it's near the end, okay? And this is on page 86. You done lived with me for 20 years, and you don't know half of me at all. And you could have, but you was so busy worshiping the works of your own hands and cuffing folks around in their minds till you didn't see a whole heap of things you could have. You changes everything, but nothing don't change you. And this is when Jody dies. Okay, so this is on page 87. Page 87 is when Joe dies. Okay, so this is pure poetry in prose. Like the way she describes his last breath and the way he's dying is so beautiful and poetic. And again, Hurston does that a lot, right? Like combines the art of poetry with prose. Okay, this is how she describes the death. A sound of strife in Jody's throat, but his eyes stared unwillingly into a corner of the room so that Janie knew the futile fight was not with her. The icy sword of the square-toed one, right? She's already described him as square-toed, death, had cut off his breath and left his hands in a pose of agonizing protest. Janie gave them peace on his breast, and then she studied his dead face for a long time. Okay, so again, she realized that fight wasn't with her, right? All of this really wasn't about her. It was him with himself, him battling his fate, right? Death in the corner is what he was fighting with his whole life, to be someone better, to be a man, right? That he could leave a legacy of, okay? So again, pure poetry in prose. I have no other way to describe that paragraph other than let's just enjoy it. Let's not dissect it. Again, it's incredible how she's using the square code one, right? She's already created that as another word for death, right? And it's incredible what she's doing there, okay? So instead of immediately yelling and screaming to the town, he's dead, what does she go and do, y'all?
Powders up.
Yes.
She like takes in her hair and lets it. Yeah, and she burns all of her hair, scarves.
Yeah.
Braids her hair, lets it like flow.
So what she does before she calls for help, she says, then she thought about herself. Years ago, she had told her girl self to wait for her in the looking glass. Isn't that beautiful, right? Wait for me, I'll be back for you. So she returns to the mirror. She returns to herself, and this is what she does. She tore off the kerchief from her head and let down her plentiful hair. The weight, the length, the glory was there. Okay, so it's interesting here, y'all, what she does. I mean, that's such a beautiful line, right? She had told her girl self. Her girl self is the springtime, is the pear tree, right? She's gone back and gotten her, released her hair, and then she yells out the window, Jody Starks is dead, right? So let's record this quote just because I think it's important here. Years ago, she had she tore off the kerchief. I'm just gonna do a lot of ellipses here, dot, dot, dot. The weight, the length, the glory. Was there. And that's on page 87 as well. All right, so here, her girl self. This is the girl under the what? The pear tree. Okay. And then the weight, the length, the glory is the strength / power of her sexuality / hair. Okay, so do we understand that her hair, I'm sorry if you can't see that well, David, that her hair is a trope. It's a symbol of her power, right? And again, her taking back her sexuality, taking back her body, her hair is something that men reach out and touch and sexualize. It's something she's using as power here. Right here?
Yeah.
Was there.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry, pretty messy.
It's also cool because in the beginning, I said it once, she said like her grandmother's hair to leave. And of course, there's often fertility associated with like fruits.
Yeah.
Tree, you know?
No, that's
Like
so true.
sexuality.
Yeah, that's good.
She talks about how much she hates her family.
It's coming up. I'm about to get there. Okay. So then in chapter 9, we have the funeral and everything else. Okay. So again, y'all were talking about this. This is important too. Before she slept that night, she burnt up every one of her head rags and went about the house the next morning with her hair in one thick braid, swinging well below her waist. Okay. So again, she's finally free to do what she wants with her hair. She talks about her grandmother here. This is interesting. She hated her grandmother and had hidden it from herself all these years under a cloak of pity. This is on page 89. She had been getting ready for her great journey to the horizons in search of people. It was important to all the world that she should find them and they her. But she had been whipped like a cur dog and run down a back road after things. Okay, so this is significant, y'all, for chapter 9 here. I'm going to move to this side of the board. In chapter 9, this is we have this theme of horizon.
But horizon thing almost kind of confused me.
What do you mean?
It was like her grandmother said like hiding the horizon
Mm-hmm.
and
We're going to get to that right now. Good. Yeah, exactly. She talks about that. Okay, so she says, here Nanny had taken the biggest thing God ever made, the horizon. For no matter how far a person can go, the horizon is still way beyond you, and pinched it in such a little bit of a thing that she could tie it around her granddaughter's neck, tight enough to choke her. She hated the old woman who had twisted her so in the name of love. Most humans didn't love one another no how, and this mislove was so strong that even common blood couldn't overcome it all the time. She talks about she had been set in the marketplace to sell. Okay, so again, she talks here about how, again, let's do this here. This is a quote. Nanny had taken the biggest thing God ever made, the horizon. Okay, that's still on page 89. So again, what is this horizon? What is the horizon symbolic of?
The first chapter,
Okay, good. What is the horizon?
what everyone like wants, like a dream. What everyone wants, dream. Yeah, that's it.
So theory, all she's saying here is that Nanny stifled her dreams under the name of love, right? So instead of letting her dream, she wanted security for her. And again, whether you think that's right or wrong, and I'm sure Janie doesn't feel like she truly hates Nanny, but there is a lot of bitterness there. And maybe y'all have experienced that too with your parents or someone in your life where you feel like they're stifling something in you, but it's to protect you, right? And so again, we always struggle with that. And even as an adult, right? 17 years later, she's still struggling with this idea if Nanny did the right thing for her. Okay. So again, we have the horizon coming back up too. She believes again that Nanny had objectified her in the name of men, right? She felt like she was something up for sale when that was a beautiful, there's so much to talk about, but the jewel inside of her that needs to shine, right, had been stifled by Nanny because of her want to get married. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense there. Last but not least, I have a really interesting quote here. It's at the end when she's fishing with Phoebe and all of these men have come to court Janie because, y'all, she's got a lot of money. She's powerful in the town, okay? It's been a few months. She's out of mourning. They're fishing, and this is what she says to Joe. It says, ain't not that I'll worry over Joe's death, Phoebe. I just loves this freedom. What is this intertextuality with?
Don't tell me. Wait. Say
Can
it
you
again.
reread it?
Okay. I can't say this. Tain't that it ain't that is basically what she's saying. It ain't that I worries over Joe's death, Phoebe. I just loves this freedom. Mm-hmm.
That is Gatsby.
it can't be done.
Wait. What?
Short story.
Oh my God! The girl that died. The girl that died when her husband had a heart attack.
Oh.
Tell me.
What's it? What is it?
Oh no!
When you fell down the stairs or something? Didn't
Yes,
you?
and she
The train.
No, she heard that her husband had died. Her husband hadn't actually died. He
Yeah.
showed up at the door, and she goes, "Oh my God!" And then she dies.
Yeah, and she had her.
Yeah, what was her name?
I don't
What was
know.
the name of the story? Who wrote it?
I don't know, but there was
Something.
a lot of nature mixed
Just
into
wait,
that.
I have my whole entire book and every single story we've ever written.
All right. I'm going to tell you. It's
No,
okay.
don't.
No.
Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Story of the Hour by Kate Chopin.
Yep. Intertextuality with Chopin's The Story.
That came before this?
Yes, that was in the 1800s of an hour. Okay, her name was Mrs. Mallard.
Mallard.
Yeah, there's no way I could have done that.
Mrs. Mallard and the famous quote, "The joy that kills."
We'll go in again.
Oops. Isn't it fun, y'all, though, that you have all this in your arsenal to start calling out this intertextuality? It's pretty amazing here. Okay, guys, so go ahead and write that down again. This idea of freedom, intertextuality. So Janie, y'all, is going into a new chapter in her life, right? We've made it through her when she was 17, through her 20s in the store with Joe. And now Joe is dead and she's 35 and has everything at her feet. Okay. So we're going to see who will come into her life and how her life is going to evolve and change. It's pretty interesting here what's going to happen. Okay. So on your quiz on Monday, I will have your last quizzes. I'll give them back to you so you can look at your feedback during the quiz that you're taking on Monday. The quiz on Monday will cover chapters 6 through 9. Okay, remember we had this long discussion for these 3 chapters today, but don't forget all of that stuff with chapter 6. That was pretty intense, those conversations we had about that. Okay, so make sure you read over all of those notes. It will look the same as your last quiz. Short answer, show what you know, really kind of digging into what I've had to say about the book, but of course your own opinions and insight wrapped in. Okay, so if you just go over your response and analysis and all of our notes, you should be good for Monday. Okay.